There's a moment happening in the WNBA right now that has fans arguing all over social media, sports talk shows, and basketball forums. And surprisingly, it centers around three of the biggest young stars in women's basketball: Angel Reese, Caitlin Clark, and Paige Bueckers. Because according to recent discussions, Angel Reese may have done something against Paige Bueckers that Caitlin Clark couldn't. But before anyone jumps to conclusions, this is not about tearing down Caitlin Clark or crowning Angel Reese as superior. It's about understanding matchups, context, styles of play, and why certain performances create such strong reactions among fans. Reports suggest that fans are increasingly comparing every single interaction between these rising stars, and honestly, that says a lot about where women's basketball is right now. The spotlight is brighter than ever. Every game is dissected. Every stat becomes a debate. And every matchup feels personal to different fan bases. What makes this conversation interesting is that it isn't built entirely on headlines. It's built on real performances, real defensive moments, and real reactions from fans who are trying to figure out how these young stars stack up against one another as the league evolves. And the deeper you look into it, the more complicated the story becomes. To understand why people are saying Angel Reese did what Caitlin Clark couldn't against Paige Bueckers, we have to start with the context behind these players and how fans have followed them for years before they even entered the professional spotlight. For Caitlin Clark, much of the attention has always revolved around offensive brilliance. Her shooting range, passing creativity, and ability to control pace made her one of the most talked about college players ever. When she entered the WNBA, expectations were enormous. Some fans expected immediate dominance. Others believed the physicality and defensive pressure at the professional level would create a difficult adjustment period. And to be fair, both perspectives contained some truth. Clark showed flashes of elite playmaking almost immediately, but reports and game analysis also showed teams targeting her physically and defensively. Opponents pressured her full court, trapped her in pick-and-roll situations, and forced her into difficult decisions. Fans reacted strongly to those moments, with some believing she was being unfairly treated, while others argued this is simply what happens to every highly hyped rookie guard. Angel Reese entered the league under a completely different narrative. Her game has never been built around logo threes or flashy ball handling. Instead, her reputation came from relentless rebounding, physicality, energy, transition effort, and defensive versatility. Some analysts questioned whether her offensive game would translate smoothly to the professional level. Others believed her motor alone would guarantee success. Then there's Paige Bueckers, who has long been viewed as one of the most polished guards in women's basketball. Even before officially stepping into the WNBA spotlight, discussions around her skill set were intense. Her pace, composure, shot creation, and basketball IQ made many fans believe she could become one of the league's next elite guards almost immediately. So when these names appear together in conversations, emotions naturally rise. Now here's where the specific debate started gaining traction. According to fan discussions following recent matchups and highlight clips, some viewers believe Angel Reese managed to disrupt or challenge Paige Bueckers in ways Caitlin Clark did not during certain head-to-head situations or defensive sequences. Again, this needs context. Basketball is not tennis. It's not one player versus one player for an entire game. Matchups shift constantly. Coaching systems matter. Teammates matter. Defensive assignments matter. A guard and a forward impact the game in completely different ways. But fans online often simplify basketball into direct comparisons because that creates stronger narratives. And in this case, many reactions centered around defensive intensity. Angel Reese's style naturally creates visible moments. When she contests shots aggressively, fights for rebounds, or pressures players physically, fans notice immediately. Those moments translate well into highlight clips and social media discussions. So when Reese had possessions where she made things difficult for Paige Bueckers, fans amplified those moments quickly. Meanwhile, Caitlin Clark's role is entirely different. Clark's responsibility is usually initiating offense, reading defenses, creating scoring opportunities, and managing tempo. Her value is not primarily judged through physical defensive battles. But in online sports culture, nuance often disappears. That's why some fans started saying Angel Reese did what Caitlin Clark couldn't. But what exactly does that mean? For some people, it means Reese brought a level of defensive pressure and physicality that visibly affected Paige Bueckers during stretches of play. For others, it simply means Reese looked more comfortable embracing direct confrontation and emotional intensity. However, there's another side to this discussion that deserves attention. Many basketball analysts would argue these comparisons are unfair from the beginning because Clark and Reese are asked to do fundamentally different things on the court. Caitlin Clark is expected to create offense at an elite level almost every possession. That responsibility changes everything. Guards handling constant defensive pressure expend enormous energy orchestrating offense. Meanwhile, Reese's role often allows her to focus more heavily on rebounding battles, interior defense, and physical momentum plays. So comparing them directly in one isolated category can oversimplify the bigger picture. Still, fans are reacting because sports conversations are emotional. And emotionally, people remember visible moments more than strategic details. If Angel Reese bodies up a player defensively, grabs a rebound in traffic, and stares down the crowd, that clip spreads instantly. If Caitlin Clark quietly manipulates a defense and creates 3 open looks through smart passing, casual viewers may not react as strongly even if the basketball impact is enormous. This is part of why discussions around these players become so intense online. And honestly, it also reflects how women's basketball coverage is changing. For years, critics claimed the sport lacked mainstream drama, rivalries, and personality-driven conversations. Now the opposite is happening. Every gesture becomes a headline. Every matchup becomes symbolic. Fans pick sides quickly. Some viewers strongly defend Caitlin Clark and argue she receives unfair criticism despite carrying massive offensive responsibilities. Others believe Angel Reese is constantly undervalued because her game is based more on effort, toughness, and physical presence rather than flashy scoring. And Paige Bueckers often ends up right in the middle because many fans see her as a player capable of combining skill, efficiency, and composure at the highest level. That combination creates non-stop comparisons. What's fascinating is how differently each player handles attention. Clark often appears composed under relentless scrutiny, even when opposing crowds target her or social media debates explode after games. Reese embraces emotion openly and has repeatedly leaned into competitive intensity throughout her career. Paige Bueckers tends to project calm confidence, which many fans interpret as maturity beyond her years. These personality differences shape fan reactions almost as much as basketball itself. For example, if Reese celebrates aggressively after a defensive stop against Paige Bueckers, supporters view it as passion and competitive fire. Critics may call it excessive. If Clark remains calm after struggling defensively against pressure, some viewers praise professionalism, while others interpret it as frustration or passiveness. The exact same sequence can generate completely different narratives depending on who's watching. And that's important because many viral debates online are driven more by perception than full game analysis. According to recent discussions, some fans specifically pointed to moments where Angel Reese appeared more physically disruptive against Paige Bueckers than Clark had been in similar situations. But again, there's a basketball reality underneath those clips. Reese is built for physical disruption. Clark is built for offensive orchestration. Paige Bueckers is built for controlled efficiency. These are different archetypes. One reason Paige Bueckers receives so much praise is because she rarely seems rushed. Even under defensive pressure, she maintains balance and patience. That can frustrate defenders because emotional reactions are limited. Reese, however, has the physical tools and relentless energy to at least challenge rhythm through constant activity. That does not automatically mean she owns the matchup or that Clark failed somehow. It simply means different players affect games differently. And honestly, some of the fan debate may say more about expectations than actual performance. Caitlin Clark entered the league carrying historic attention. With that attention came impossible standards. Some fans expect her to dominate every matchup offensively, while also surviving elite defensive pressure. When that doesn't happen instantly, criticism grows louder. Angel Reese entered with a different burden. Critics questioned efficiency, offensive polish, and long-term ceiling. So when Reese produces visible winning plays, especially defensively or on the glass, supporters feel vindicated. That emotional contrast fuels online arguments constantly. Another layer to this conversation is how women's basketball media has evolved through social platforms. Years ago, nuanced analysis might have stayed within dedicated basketball circles. Today, a 6-second clip can define public perception overnight. One defensive possession becomes evidence of dominance. One missed shot becomes proof of failure. Fans react instantly before watching full games or understanding broader context. And algorithms reward conflict. A title saying, "Angel Reese did what Caitlin Clark couldn't," spreads much faster than a balanced discussion about role differences and tactical matchups. But beneath the sensational framing, there is still a real basketball conversation worth having. Can physical defenders disrupt skilled guards through relentless energy? Absolutely. Does Angel Reese bring a level of physical competitiveness that changes momentum? Definitely. Does Caitlin Clark contribute in different ways that may not always appear in viral clips? Also yes. This is why balanced analysis matters. When people reduce players to internet narratives, the actual basketball gets lost. For example, Clark's impact often extends beyond scoring. Her passing gravity forces defenses into uncomfortable rotations. Teams adjust entire defensive schemes because of her shooting range. Even on nights when efficiency drops, her presence changes spacing and tempo. Angel Reese impacts games differently. Offensive rebounds create extra possessions. Transition hustle changes energy. Physical rebounding can psychologically wear opponents down over 4 quarters. Paige Bueckers thrives because she processes the game so smoothly. She rarely forces action unnecessarily. She adapts to defensive pressure quickly and often makes the correct read. So when these players face each other, it's not simply about who won. It's about which style imposed itself more effectively in certain moments. Fans, however, love definitive answers. That's why reactions online became so strong. Some Caitlin Clark supporters argued the comparison itself was disrespectful because Clark's role is significantly harder from a playmaking perspective. Others countered that Reese deserves more credit for defensive intensity and toughness. Meanwhile, many neutral fans simply enjoyed seeing women's basketball produce debates normally associated with major men's sports rivalries. And honestly, that may be the biggest takeaway here. The league is growing fast enough that these conversations now dominate sports media cycles. Another interesting aspect is how much pressure young players now face before fully developing professionally. In previous eras, rookies often had time to grow quietly. Today, every possession is clipped, debated, and ranked online within minutes. That environment can distort reality. A rookie struggling against defensive pressure doesn't mean failure. A strong defensive sequence doesn't automatically establish long-term superiority. But social media rewards extremes. So when Angel Reese visibly succeeds in moments against Paige Bueckers, fans naturally compare it to moments where Caitlin Clark may have struggled against elite pressure or physical defenses. The problem is that basketball development is never linear. Players evolve. Clark may improve defensively over time. Reese may expand offensively. Paige Bueckers may become even more efficient as she gains experience. What seems true in 1 month may look completely different a year later. That's why many analysts caution against making sweeping conclusions too early. Still, there's no denying that Angel Reese has impressed many observers with her ability to impact games through effort and physicality. Even critics, who question parts of her game, often acknowledge her motor is elite. And that motor matters in high-intensity matchups. Reese consistently creates second-chance opportunities, competes for loose balls, and embraces contact. Those plays energize teammates and fans. They also translate strongly on television and social media because hustle is universally respected. Caitlin Clark, meanwhile, continues adjusting to constant defensive attention. Reports suggest opponents prioritize making her uncomfortable from the opening tip. That level of focus can affect efficiency, rhythm, and overall flow. But it also reflects respect. Teams don't build entire defensive game plans around players they don't fear. And Paige Bueckers' calm approach adds another fascinating dimension, because she often appears unaffected emotionally by chaos around her. That composure is part of why fans and analysts speak so highly about her future potential. So when Reese disrupts that calm even briefly, fans notice. That's where much of the current discussion comes from. Not necessarily dominance. Not necessarily failure. But contrast. Contrast between styles, expectations, and visible impact. Another important point here is that fans sometimes confuse defensive success with overall value. A player can have an excellent defensive sequence and still be outperformed overall. A player can struggle individually while still controlling the game strategically. Basketball is layered. And when conversations become too simplified, viewers miss the complexity that makes the sport interesting. For example, Clark's shooting gravity may create open lanes for teammates even when she isn't scoring efficiently herself. Reese's rebounding may extend possessions even when her offensive efficiency fluctuates. Paige Bueckers' decision-making may stabilize an offense without producing flashy stat lines. Those subtleties matter. Yet online discussions often reduce everything into winner versus loser narratives, because those narratives generate engagement. According to recent discussions, some fans also believe media coverage itself influences these comparisons unfairly. Certain viewers argue Caitlin Clark receives excessive scrutiny because of her popularity. Others argue Angel Reese receives disproportionate criticism because her personality is more expressive and emotional on court. There's probably some truth to both perspectives. High-profile athletes often become symbols for broader cultural conversations whether they want to or not. And once that happens, every basketball discussion carries extra emotional weight. That's part of why debates involving Clark, Reese, and Paige Bueckers feel bigger than ordinary player comparisons. These players represent different styles, personalities, and fan communities all colliding at the same moment in women's basketball history. The result is non-stop attention. But beyond the drama and social media arguments, there's also something positive happening here. People are watching. People care deeply about outcomes, rivalries, matchups, and player development. That level of investment helps the sport grow. Years ago, discussions like this might never have reached mainstream audiences. Today they dominate timelines for days. And while some debates become toxic, many fans are genuinely engaging with basketball strategy and player development more seriously than before. That's good for the game. Because underneath every viral headline is a deeper basketball truth: greatness comes in different forms. Caitlin Clark's greatness may come through offensive creativity and floor vision. Angel Reese's greatness may come through relentless effort and physical competitiveness. Paige Bueckers' greatness may come through efficiency, balance, and composure. Different strengths, different paths. And maybe that's why these comparisons are so compelling. Fans are not just debating statistics. They're debating basketball identity itself. What matters more? Flash or physicality? Shot creation or rebounding? Calm efficiency or emotional intensity? There may never be universal agreement, but that tension keeps audiences invested. As these careers continue developing, the matchups will only become more meaningful. Every future game between these stars will carry history, fan expectations, and media narratives into the arena. And honestly, that pressure can either overwhelm players or elevate them. So far, all three have shown resilience in different ways. Clark continues handling extraordinary scrutiny while adjusting to professional defenses. Reese continues proving that energy and toughness can absolutely influence games at the highest level. Paige Bueckers continues demonstrating why so many believe her skill set translates beautifully to elite basketball. And perhaps the most important thing to remember is this: one matchup never defines a career. One viral clip never tells the full story. One defensive possession doesn't erase everything another player contributes. But in today's sports culture, moments matter more than ever. And right now, the moment fans are debating is whether Angel Reese managed to impose herself against Paige Bueckers in a way Caitlin Clark hasn't yet. Some fans say yes. Others strongly disagree. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle. Because basketball is rarely as simple as social media wants it to be. And maybe the real question isn't whether Angel Reese did what Caitlin Clark couldn't. Maybe the real question is this: are we finally witnessing the beginning of a new era in women's basketball where multiple young stars are so talented, so competitive, and so closely watched that every single matchup feels like a major event?